Western theme today, as you might tell from my splash outfit here. An author whom I much admire and who's made an incredible splash in only 5 years' time, Michael?
5 years.
Michael McGarrity from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks. Nice to be with you, Barbara.
It's
How are you?
Nice. Well, I'm absolutely great. Thank you. I want to congratulate you again. Michael did a writer's workshop at the store last night and was caught by surprise. 50 people surprised nearly.
It was quite unexpected. I thought we were going to have a small little group of people who could just sit and chat about avoiding formula fiction, but it really turned into a lecture, I guess. But it was a lot of fun.
It was actually quite interactive. I thought that you excelled at getting people to ask you questions about their own interest in writing or their own fascination with how you do it.
Well, I think part of it is the fact that I'm just so blatantly opinionated, Barbara. That
Not you.
Yeah, that it just gets people interacting with me, because I do throw out strong ideas, and I do express strong feelings about what I do as a writer and what strikes me as good in writing. And I think it just makes for a lot of free-flowing, back and forth idea sharing.
Well, you definitely give people something to bounce against. But what I thought was very clever of you was that when you do proffer one of these positive opinions, you end it in sort of an interrogative note or with a hook, such that, you know, you'll say it, and then you'll say, don't I, or won't you, or something, so that I wouldn't say that it softens it, but it invites response, whereas if you just made a declaratory sentence, people would say, you know.
Yeah, I don't really think that you can talk about writing as an absolute anyway.
No.
Because it's so particular to the individual. I mean, it's really an idiosyncratic craft. And that's not to say that you can't borrow from other writers, that you can't apprentice yourself in a way to other writers by learning what they do and valuing what they do. I mean, you can't do it the way a painter can with a master painter, an apprentice with a master painter. But you can learn from master writers.
By reading them primarily?
By reading them and by studying how they put stories together, and then you can use that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying to imitate, to a certain extent, learning an art. I mean, students do it all the time. They're constantly out there trying to develop techniques that others have perfected before them. And writing is like that to a certain extent, but then you've got to get beyond that and establish your own, I hate to use the word, but it's really, I guess, a valid word to use, your own voice and your own storytelling capacity.
You binned how many novels, or put them in the famous bottom drawer?
Three very bad novels that were a hell of a lot of fun to write.
When you say bad, what do you mean by bad?
Well, as I was talking last night, you know, I'm basically unschooled. I mean, I didn't go and study writing. I didn't go to writers' support groups or writers' conferences. I mean, writing was something I took up as kind of a personal desire to try to see if I could do, to try to see if I could tell a story. And as a consequence, I just had to learn as I went. And they were bad in terms of making all the silly mistakes that writers make. Not keeping a story going, writing dialogue that was stiff and wooden, putting too many internal monologues on the page that characters were ruminating about, stopping the flow with backstory, incidental, that made no difference.
Were they too autobiographical?
No, they weren't autobiographical at all. I mean, I think that's a kind of an academic ruse to believe that every writer's first novel is autobiographical. I don't think that's necessarily the case. For me, it was a case of stumbling across a couple of really sound character ideas that I was able to create, and those characters became so interesting to me that I wanted to keep developing them and seeing where I could take them in terms of a story, a plot idea.
Well, you had yourself been engaged in two professions that it seems to me would absolutely generate story ideas. You've been a cop, and then I'm not sure I quite heard you correctly last night, but something to do with counseling.
I was a psychotherapist. Right?
Sorry, that was it. And I would think that both of those would have given you, you know, interesting characters and difficult situations.
Rich experiences to draw on. seeing people at their worst, seeing people at their best, seeing good people hammered by bad situations, seeing bad people do nasty things. It was a remarkable sort of apprenticeship for me, and I didn't even know at the time that I was apprenticing myself in these fields to become a writer. It certainly wasn't in the back of my head, but one of the things that I do believe, and I was talking about last night to people, is this whole issue of writing from experience, writing from the truth of what you know. And while it doesn't always have to be first-hand experience or first-hand truth, it has to be researched well enough and understood well enough by the writer that he or she makes it his or her own and puts it on a page in such a way that the reader sees and feels and senses the authenticity to it. And that's really the important element that I was trying to get across last night. Was like what Mark Twain said to Rudyard Kipling when Kipling asked Twain about writing, and Twain said, first learn the facts, then do with them what you will. And that makes just a lot of sense. And that's what I try to do with my books. A lot of people will ask me, well, did you ever really investigate this particular kind of crime that was in one of my novels? And not always, no. But I know enough about the profile of that type of criminal, and I know enough about the police procedurals that are going to be used in terms of investigating the case, that I can take those and then match them with my own ideas of how the criminal mind might be operating in that situation and how the investigation might proceed to make it come alive and make it have some sort of factual basis to it.
You know, when you say unschooled, it's interesting because I think what you meant was, you know, it's only in the technique of writing that you were unschooled, because there are plenty of writers, I think, who go through MFA programs and other things, and they learn a lot about writerly techniques, but they don't really have stories to tell.
They don't, and they still tell them, and they get published, and they're mind-boggling boring very often. But that's what's taught. I was mentioning a book last night that deals with how academia has sort of taken over the novel and usurped it from the masses, if you will. And I think to a certain extent that's right. I mean, who is to say what is literature and what is commercial fiction? And who is to say what is great writing opposed to hack writing? I don't really think that there's much unity between what the buying public goes out and buys and reads and what the university professors say that people should be reading. Now who's right in this situation? I mean, there's some give and take on both sides, but it seems to me that one of the things that's true is that good storytelling cuts across all genres and can be considered literature, whether it's mystery fiction or historical fiction or romance fiction or science fiction. Look at Ray Bradbury. He writes science fiction, and yet he's a brilliant writer. And he transcends the genre of science fiction.
My least favorite phrase. Sorry, I just want to go
Yeah,
when
I know,
anybody
I know.
says that.
But,
Oh.
okay, I'll use it 3 or 4 times.
But you're really getting me going.
I get
Okay.
you going. Yeah. And look at Patrick O'Brien,
Right.
who wrote those wonderful Aubrey Marturin novels, those seafaring novels.
And
Again,
whose own life, I might add, really will make an interesting book if anyone writes it. Who
Yes,
knew?
there's a biography out on him already.
Right.
But again, he transcends the categories that are often used to describe where a writer fits in this hierarchy, supposedly. So it all depends on your point of view. My point of view is good storytelling is good regardless where it fits into any category.